Check. 1, 2, and 3. Good morning, Royal We Fellowship. Good morning. Good morning. It's good to be here. It's been a while since we have been together to come together and share the word. Last weekend was the event, the Life After Death event, and I was out Saturday. I should have put something out there to remind everybody, but that's where last Saturday was the live event. That's why we were not here. I apologize if there is a lag in this because oftentimes the new location makes it kind of laggy. I'm set up in a new location right now, and it looks like there might be some kind of a lag going on. But either way, we're going to just go ahead and get through it. Hopefully, the lag will not be too disruptive. Hopefully, you can still hear the message, and that's the most important thing. So you can just turn the video off and just listen to what the Lord has to say. I see questions. What happened to the beard? I shaved. I'm clean shaven. So this is what I look like. I look a lot thinner. The beard had fattened my face up. Let's go ahead and get into the message for today. We're going to put together two different messages because there's some important things that we need to understand about our own lives as we continue living in a very toxic world where narcissistic people exist, right? Because narcissists exist everywhere. We are, in fact, in a toxic world, and it's always been this way. It's never been different. It's been this way since Adam and Eve were pushed out of the garden. It's been this way since God spoke light into darkness, right? The knowledge of God, the knowledge that God has is that the world is good and evil. And one of the things we're understanding is that God is pulling his people out of the world, out of evil. He pulled his people out of Egypt, out of their culture, out of society to put them in a brand new life that's going to make these people God's people. Amongst a world that is toxic, a world that is selfish, a world that wants certain things that are worldly, God is saying, this is how I'm going to make you my people, and I'm going to protect you. This is why it's so important for us to understand the book of Exodus and what's really going on here. So I want to briefly go over what we talked about in Exodus chapter 23, where we finalize some of the laws that the people are supposed to live by. I'm going to touch on these things here. Exodus chapter 23, verse 1, laws of justice and mercy. This is what God is saying. This is how you are going to be different than the rest of the world. Chapter 23, do not spread false reports. Do not help a guilty person by being a malicious witness. This is what the world does, by the way. This is what narcissists do. We call it smear campaigns. We call it gossiping. So God, in this law given to his people, acknowledges that this is a part of the world. This is what the world does. They want to point at somebody and say it's all your fault, and then go to other people and say so-and-so is doing this, whether it's true or not. So-and-so is doing this. The intention behind it is malicious, to hurt them, to get other people to look bad on those people. That's narcissism. God is saying, you don't do that. God is saying, I see that the world does that. This is narcissist. You don't do that. You're different. Number 2, do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. Right? So when people, narcissists in this world, are maliciously smear campaigning, it's easy to get a crowd to do wrong things. We've seen this time and time again in our own society. Well, let's go and burn buildings down. Let's go and throw things. Let's go bother people why they eat. Let's go start war. Let's go fight. Let's go force change. This is wrongdoing. This is wrongdoing. One of the things you're going to see is as God is leading his people, he's leading his people away from the world. One of the things you'll see the enemy of the world doing is pushing people into the world to force others to change. That's of the devil. The Lord pulls people out of the culture and society and says, follow me. I'll take you to a brand new place that's empty. But you're going to have to separate from those rules. So do you see the difference? I'm going to say this again. A narcissistic culture tries to force change into other people, another group. It's the oppression mentality. It's the oppression mentality. That's narcissism. That's what narcissists do. Let's oppress others and make them bow down to what we want. God's people in the book of Exodus is no. We're going to pull you out and away from oppressive people, even if that means you leave the land you're on, you leave the culture, you leave the state, you leave the country, you go where I'm going to take you. Do you see the difference of what God's people are doing versus what the world does? It's as clear. It's clear. God could have caused an army of people to go and change Egypt, couldn't he? Right? He could have rained down fire and brimstone right away on Egypt and destroyed it and just given Egypt over to his people, but he didn't. He wanted to pull his people out. And people say, well, Egypt was destroyed, Kevin. Well, that's because when God was taking his people out, Egypt, the Pharaoh, relentlessly pursued. Egypt challenged God. We want to capture people and keep them our slaves, which again is what narcissists do. How many of you have experienced that? You leave a narcissistic ex, you leave narcissistic family, and they don't like to let you go, do they? Because you're their prisoner. And so they fight, and they chase, and they stalk. Again, that's what the enemy does. Wants to force people, okay? Don't be like that. Now, so do not follow the crowd in wrongdoing. So God is telling him, I'm separating you from the world. Verse number 4, I'm going to skip to verse number 4. Oh, well, actually, verse number 3. Do not show favoritism to a poor person in a lawsuit. Don't show favoritism. Use just. Be rational in everything that we do, okay? And use prayer, obviously. Verse 4, if you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to return it. This is an interesting one. Number 4 here, if you come across your enemy's ox or donkey, understand this. This is something that we have a hard time with. God is saying, if you're going to be following me, if you're going to be part of God's people, you're going to have enemies. Man, most Christians have a hard time with this. We want to be, most Christians, and I fell into this category too. Christians want to be loved and accepted by everybody, and I'm a good person. I know how to give and love, and if I give and love, then people should like me, and people should be kind in return. No, you're going to have enemies. And God says this, listen, as you follow along and as I lead you on this journey in life, there's going to be enemies, straight up people who are going to hate you because you will not bow down to them, because you will not submit to their authority. They will become your enemies. So it makes sense as you live your life for God and you fail to submit to other people and what they want you to do, they will hate you. Especially the more into the world they are, they're going to hate you even more. These are going to be your enemies. Now watch this, because there's an instruction here. If you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to return it. That's a nice thing to do, isn't it? What actually this is the first example that we see of what loving your enemies looks like. All right? Now, we know that in the New Testament, Jesus talks a lot about this. Christianity has blown up everything with love your enemies, right? And Christianity sends people out there, and it's been so twisted, this word love, people don't even know what it means. And as a result, people get involved intimately with bad people, with toxic, narcissistic people, because they think that they need to love them. And then they're guilty if they leave, and they're guilty if, you know what I mean? And so when it comes down to loving your enemies, this is what it looks like. This is the example given. It's not an intimate love. It's not going and having coffee. It's not having lengthy conversations. It's not going to their parties. It's not going on dates with them. That's not what it is. The love that we are to have towards our enemies, narcissistic people, is just this right here. If you come across their ox or donkey wandering off, return it. There's your donkey. It was out in the middle of the street. Right? That's it. This, by the way, is called agape. Doing the right thing. It's a selfless love. Agape. Doing something, expecting nothing in return. Now, in order to do something and expect nothing in return, you have to do something that is not over and beyond for you, emotionally, mentally, or physically. It doesn't need to be over and beyond. It doesn't need to be you trading in your valuable time. It doesn't need to be you. No. It just needs to be you within your capacity, your scope and capacity of what you're doing. If you see something is going wrong, or if you see something is wrong, you just fix it right then and there. You know, it's kind of like if you're out, let's say, and you are shopping at a store, or you're at a restaurant or fast food or whatever, and you come out with some bags of food and there's a homeless person right there. You may just say, you know what, I've got 2 burritos in my bag. I really don't need 2 burritos. I'll give you one of them. Here you go. And then you have one. Out of sight, out of mind. You leave. You're not really hurt by it. You didn't really go over and beyond because you don't really need 2 burritos. You only really need 1 burrito. And now you fed a homeless person. That person can't repay you, but you don't care because you don't need to be repaid for that. This is selfless love. This is agape. That's all it is. And so this is the first instruction that we see of agape right here. If your enemy's donkey wanders off, return it. You don't need to expect no rewards, by the way. It's not, hey, here's your donkey. Are you going to give me a tip? No, God doesn't say that. It's just, oh, I saw your donkey over there's your donkey, right? Your enemy. Another thing that to understand is that these enemies that you're going to have can, in fact, be within your own group. As much as God is trying to change people and get them all to live together in a unified fashion as God's people, there's an understanding that you're going to have enemies even within your own group. There's going to be people who are not going to like you because of their own bitterness and envies and jealousies and what have you, okay? Now, these rules are meant to keep everybody safe, though, and everybody on the same page and together. All right, so keep that in mind as well. And that keeps peace. So, again, there's the idea that you don't have to necessarily like everybody in your tribe, but God is giving instructions on how to have peace, okay? Number 6, do not deny justice to any poor people in their lawsuits. Number 7, have nothing to do with false charge, and do not put an innocent or honest person to death. For I will not acquit the guilty. Do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners, because you were foreigners in Egypt. A lot of things. What God is saying here, number 9, is very interesting. Do not oppress foreigners. You yourselves know what it feels like to be foreigners, because you were foreigners in Egypt. A lot of times, you'll hear narcissists say things like, I like to make people happy because I know what it's like to not be happy or whatever. I've heard this. I've seen this on social media. People who I've known are mean towards others, acting as though they're good and nice, and they're really not. And it struck me as this. Let me rephrase this. How many of you have heard the saying, hurt people, for example? Not true. Not true. This right here is evidence, right? God is telling people right here, do not oppress foreigners. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners. The last thing that hurt people from abusive relationships want to do is go and hurt other people. Share that hurt, right? I don't buy into the whole idea that narcissistic people, bullies, abusive people do it because they're hurting. I think they do it because they're half crazy, possibly. Something wrong genetically, environmentally. You know, science still doesn't understand why narcissists and evil people do what they do. But it's not because they're hurting. I don't believe it's because they've experienced that necessarily. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't, but I've experienced it growing up. The last thing I want to do is go out and hurt other people. So there's another element in that we're not getting. But God is acknowledging this here, saying, don't oppress a foreigner. You know how it feels to be foreigners because you were foreigners in Egypt. You were oppressed in Egypt. So if strangers come in and mix among you, don't oppress them. Don't make slaves out of them, right? And chances are, because they've experienced that, they won't want to. Kind of makes you wonder and rethink about what causes narcissists to do what they do. What caused them to bully and be aggressive? Is it really because their parents were aggressive? No, because their parents were aggressive, then if they've experienced that, then they wouldn't want to be a part of it, typically. Interesting, right? Then we get into the festivals, and as we talked about last week, God does really enjoy festivals. He has his people party a lot. It really does. There's festivals 3 times a year, large festivals. So God's all about getting together, celebrating, taking time away from your work, coming together and having a time of worship and fellowship. And, to be honest with you, I think even the modern day churches, Christian churches, for example, with all their big hoopla buildings and stuff like that, they don't even celebrate as much as in the Old Testament they celebrated. 3 times a year, you're to celebrate a festival to me. And these festivals would last weeks long. Celebrate the festival of unleavened bread, right? Again, that's a festival represented by hastiness. Unleavened bread represents hastiness. There's no time to cook the bread to perfection. You just got to go now. And then that right there is going to be a celebration. We're going to celebrate unleavened bread. We're going to celebrate that we moved in hastiness. And for 7 days, eat bread made without yeast, as I commanded you. So 7 days, that festival, time of fellowship, worship. I've had the privilege of, in a messianic congregation, which is a Christianity that observes Christian messianic. It's Christianity that observes some of the ancient Hebrew traditions. And so I was able to go to some of these festivals, like the Feast of Unleavened Bread, for 7 days. And it's fun. They'd camp out and eat unleavened bread, challah, which is very good. Man, it's good. It tastes good. I'm like, wow, this is unleavened bread. That tastes really good. Challah is really good. And it was just fun. It's a time of worship and fellowship and music, and for 7 days, camping out. How many of you would enjoy something like that? It's really a good time, and time for prayer, and it's cleansing, and it's just a great time. And they did this at least 3 times a year. Huge celebrations that would last weeks. All right. So we talked about that last week as well. I'm going to continue on here. I'm going to skip the festivals. And we're going to go to God's angel to prepare the way. God says this, I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you along the way and to bring you to the place I have prepared. And this is a message for all of us. Pay attention to him and listen to what he says. Do not rebel against him. He will not forgive your rebellion, since my name is in him. If you listen carefully to what he says and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies, and I will oppose those who oppose you. My angel will go ahead of you and bring you into the land of the Amorites. Now, this is an interesting concept here. What God is saying is, listen, you live according to these instructions I'm giving you. What's happening, what's taking place in your life is you are becoming my people. You are becoming set apart from the world. And if you do this, I will go before you, and I will be an enemy to your enemy. I will make sure that nothing touches you, nothing harms you, but you must stay in line. You must stay in line. You must stay a part of this group. You must stay a part of this instruction. You can't waver off. You can't go off into the world. You can't go and have relationships and be with people you have no business being with. You can't go dabble in this and dabble in that, because you'll invite that enemy and that world into your life, and it will steal you away from what I'm trying to do in your life and where I want you to go. Not only that, but then the world can overtake you. But if you stay here, I will be an enemy to your enemy. When you and when we stop messing around in a narcissistic world, in a toxic world, and we walk on a straight and narrow path, narcissists, toxic people, they recognize they can't get anything from you, and they have no power over you, and they stay out of your way. This is true. I've seen this in my own life. I realize now that my fight with narcissists, whether it was family members, whomever, it came out of my engagement with them, me being in their world, trying to fit in with them, and then trying to get them to love me. And what I've noticed is that as I backed out, moved states away, and I am back on the path that God has chosen me to be on, their temper tantrums, their fighting, their demanding, their name calling, their cussing is nowhere near me. They're out of my life. And God promises here, listen, if you stay here, then I will be their enemy. If you stay away from narcissists, whether they're family members, friends, or whatever, God will be their enemy for you. They will see you, and they will stay away from you. They will be fearful to even talk to you because you won't mess around. You won't engage. I've experienced that too. Back before I started my separation, and I know it angered them, the family members that I was dealing with that were nasty. I started my separation back before I moved here in California, and what it looked like was I started to pay no attention to them. I realized that as I was close to them and arguing and fighting, that's where they wanted me. That's where the enemy engages you and distracts you from your life. But I started to go to certain family functions and parties, and I would avoid certain people. I distanced myself, and even when they came to try to talk, I would turn my back and walk away. And some people might say that's harsh and that's judgmental. You'd walk away from people. Well, keep in mind, these are the same people that would cuss and call me names and would not hesitate to drag me into an argument. And I know that about these people. So I separate myself even if I'm in their presence. And I notice something. They stay away. Wow. No narcissistic abuse. Narcissistically abusive people demand engagement. That's the only way they can mentally and emotionally abuse, is through your engagement. When you engage with these people, you give them permission. God is saying, don't give them permission. Don't engage anymore. You stay according to my instructions, and I will be their enemy for you. Meaning they'll see you, and they'll be too scared to even approach you and talk to you. They'll be too scared to open their mouth. See, narcissists are not scared to argue with you. They're not scared to banter with you, but they are scared when you no longer engage. Why? Because whatever comes out of their mouth and you're not engaging with it, it's met with something else. It's met with God. It's met with them just hearing themselves and what they sound like. And they know it's bad, and they're terrified. A lot of times it makes them more angry. Makes them even more angry. So don't engage. Let the Lord be their enemy. As narcissists hear their own anger and their own words come out of their mouths, and you walk away. You show them your back. Right? That's allowing the Lord to be their enemy. So allow the Lord to be their enemy. The Lord says in verse 27, I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion every nation you encounter. I will make all your enemies turn their backs and run. Again, narcissists can even see you coming, but because of your lack of engagement, because you don't even resonate with their lifestyle, you don't even play in their field, you are walking with God. Allow God to do that work. God is saying, you're not going to be the one that causes them to run. I will be the one to cause them to run. They'll take one look at you and see that you're different, and they will run. Again, I've tested this and I've proven this in my own life. Since I've gotten away from narcissists, they do. They run. They will stay away from you. They look for engagement. If you don't engage, they won't bother you. It's wild. And a lot of people have a hard time with this because a lot of people don't want to believe that. A lot of people say, well, but it's family, it's this, and no engagement with them. I don't understand. And, but that's right. God says, listen, I'm not trying to make you liked by everybody. I'm trying to preserve your life. And this is what you have to do. In order to preserve your life for your generations, you have to do something that is scary to others. What can be scary to others? Having nothing to do with them. That could be the most scariest thing to some people. And there's all kinds of reasons to have nothing to do with others. No contact, as we call it. One is that it terrifies them, changes their behavior because they're scared. Two, it keeps you from becoming like them. It keeps you out of their lifestyle. Okay? So God says in verse 27, I will send terror ahead of you and throw into confusion every nation you encounter. I will make all of your enemies turn their backs and run. I will send the hornet ahead of you and drive the Hittites, the Canaanites, the Hivites out of your way. But I will not drive them out in a single year because the land would become desolate and the wild animals too numerous for you. Little by little I will drive them out before you until you have increased enough to take possession of the land. So God is telling the people, listen, yes, we'll drive them. They will be driven out of the land, but not overnight. Not overnight. Sometimes our journey of wandering and healing from narcissistic abuse and feeling like we're alone, feeling like we're homeless, it can be a while because God has to prepare us for the place that he wants us to be. It doesn't happen overnight. As God told these people who have now been wandering in the desert for a long time, it's not going to happen overnight. I'm going to drive all these people out of your lives over time so that it can be good, so it works, so you're not overwhelmed, all right? So don't feel bad and lost when it seems like you're wandering. It seems like there's no good happening yet. It seems like you haven't landed. It seems like you're not home. Don't worry yet. Don't worry. God has you wandering in this time for a reason, to keep you from being overwhelmed of something that you might not be ready to possess. Okay? So God is saying that to his people. Listen, you're not ready to possess these great big lands yet because there's not enough of you, and it'll be overwhelming. It's too much for you to take care of. So right now, just let me provide for you. This is what God is saying. All right? And so next week, what we'll get into is chapter 24. And this is going to be the covenant confirmed. This is where we're going to get into Moses actually getting the tablets. And we're going to see some important things in the covenant being confirmed with the people as Moses engages with the people and they start to repeat these things. We're going to start to see the reasons as to why certain things start to be repeated during their time of worship. We're going to start to eventually, as we get into later in the scriptures to come, we're going to start to see the significance of things like this, what I'm wearing right here, right? With the tzitzits, the prayer shawl with the tzitzits. And a lot of people still get confused about this stuff today. What is this? Why? Why do some wear this? Why do the old rabbis wear this? Well, this is instructed in the Old Testament. And the reason is going to really shed a lot of light on what God is doing in the lives of people. And it's going to shed some light on, I believe, where we're going in this day and age and what we need to reintroduce into our relationship with God, what I believe God is trying to get us to understand. This has a purpose, a very significant purpose that's long been forgotten that Christians don't understand. And we'll talk about why, all right? That's going to be in the chapters to come, and I'm anxious to get into these with you. But next week, we're going to wrap this up here. Next week, we're going to get into the covenant confirmed, right? And as it's written on the stones, and we're going to go over that, what God is telling the people, and how the people are to view the covenant. So that's going to be next week, chapter 24 of Exodus, as we continue on. I'm blessed that you are here with me this morning. I pray and bless your weekend, and I hope that you have a great week ahead, and I'm anxious to be back next Saturday, 9 o'clock a.m., hopefully 9:15. I'd like to get back to stabilizing that time. I've been making lots of changes and adjustments and where I'm at, the location. So I appreciate your patience with me in this. And we'll be back next Saturday. Hopefully you all will be here. And I'm anxious. All right. Blessings to all of you. Have a great weekend. Have a great week ahead. Shabbat Shalom. And we'll be back next Saturday at 9 a.m. Bye, everybody.